We all care about something. The interesting question is why? Pull up a chair. It's time to question everything. For this episode of Question Everything, I am being joined by a guy that I've known almost half my life, and a guy who I wanted to bring on for this episode because he inspired an idea that I shouldn't say he inspired, I should say he presented an idea that at first I rejected as being one of the dumbest things I've ever heard and contemplated, but then changed my mind and it turned into a great experience that actually leads into this discussion. I also used to host a podcast with him, a little podcast called Out of Touchstone, which you can still find the podcast on your favorite podcasting channels. The new YouTube series you can find right here on this channel on YouTube. So let me bring him in. Mike DeKalb, the hockey transplant. Welcome to the show. And
Honored to be the first guest, Chad.
Thank you. And we're not talking Touchstone movies tonight, so this is going to be a change from what we used to do.
I used to always pride myself on being able to have a knowledge of a lot of different subjects. And for anybody who doesn't know us or who hasn't watched any of the random shows, we've done so many podcasts together over the years, is that Chad and I have known each other back since college. It's sad to think about the fact that you said it's been half our lives, but yes, it has been more than half my life. But we also worked together for several years, and we would have lunch, and it would be like we'd have these really good conversations, and we're like, we should be recording these. And so credit to you, Chad. I mean, I took off with the Out of Touchstone stuff, but you always seem to come up with, you're like, now I'm going to do this podcast, now I'm going to do this web show, now I'm going to do this. I mean, it's kind of the wave of the future, right? It's like that's what people are doing, and so this is the natural evolution of your brand.
I hope so. And like I told you before, I'm making all the same mistakes I made podcasting only on YouTube, where I'm not focusing on actually one topic because I get bored with just one topic. So I want to, and there's so many things to talk about. And as we're going to talk about tonight, and I didn't grab it because it's sitting over there on my bookcase, I would have held it up I'll just put it down here in the graphic screen. But this series was inspired by Michael Schur and Joe Podzinski.
Poznanski.
So, okay. Yeah, just call him Joe. But they wrote a book called Big Fan. And I have just, luck of the happenstance, I was in Barnes & Noble, saw the book, said, oh, this sounds interesting, bought it. And then I saw on your Instagram that you had gone to a book signing that they had done and gotten the book. So let's just start there. Why I bought the book because I thought if I had celebrity and a publisher, this would be a great idea to do. Why did you buy the book?
Well, to start, they have a podcast together. It's called the Pozcast. And they've been doing it for several years. And when I started getting back into something we'll get into on this show, getting back into baseball after all the rule changes, that was one of the podcasts that I had discovered. And it was sort of like, one of the most esteemed, I wouldn't even call him a baseball writer, he's a sports writer. He's written best-selling books about football and baseball as well. And then you have like the Emmy winner, I believe he won an Emmy or a Golden Globe or something, but the creator of Parks and Rec and The Good Place. And then when I found out they did a podcast together, I said, this, it's pretty fun to listen to. And they don't necessarily drop them on a regular basis, but it's very entertaining. And then at a certain point they said, oh, we're going to write a book together. Because I was always hoping they were going to do a live podcast taping at some point, since, Michael Schur is based out of LA working in the film industry. Joe, I think he's in Charlotte. He's either in Charlotte or Kansas City. I can never remember. I think he's from Cleveland, But when I was waiting for the live taping, and then they said, oh, we're writing a book together, and so we're going to do a book tour. And I got really excited about it. The only thing that was funny was their LA date on their book tour was at 5 p.m. on Friday of Memorial Day weekend. And it was on the other side of town, up against the beach, south of the airport. So it took about 2 hours to get there. But I mean, there was a handful of people there. I do have, you don't have my book's right over here. I have an autographed copy of it. I have not read it yet because I'm in the middle of reading other book at the moment. So I give you credit for having read it. So if there's anything from that book you want to reference on this podcast, please feel free to do so. You'll have to enlighten me because I haven't read it yet.
No, like I said, honestly, I was a little disappointed in the book. I mean, it's a good read and I would recommend reading it, but for what I wanted out of the book, I don't think they explored enough. And that's
Hmm.
kind of where this series hopefully will go. And that is looking at fandom as, why are we fans? How how does fandom affect life? Whereas I think they ended up doing like, oh, we're just going to go to this random sport and see if we like it. And
Hmm.
and as the spoiler, one thing Michael Shear did that Joe sent him to was night two of WrestleMania 41 in Las Vegas, and I did not know, um, but when Michael Shear was on a writer on Saturday Night Live, he was there when The Rock hosted for the first time.
Ah.
And during the monologue, Triple H comes out and says, you know, they were getting ready for WrestleMania 2000, WrestleMania 16. And Triple H's like, I can't beat you up tonight, Rock, but I can beat up this guy here in the audience, and punches a guy in the face. And it's Michael Schur.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting. But
Well, the whole
when he,
point of that, I think, I mean, I don't know if it's mentioned in the book yet because I haven't read it,
yeah,
was that they each wanted to send the other one to a sporting event that they did not like.
yes,
And so Michael chose pickleball, I think, for Joe because Joe can't
yeah,
stand pickleball. And Joe chose WrestleMania for Mike. Yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah. He sends him to a great Dead and Company show at the Sphere the night before, and
and
then
he did that
WrestleMania.
too.
And you know, I, as a wrestling fan, which we will explore on future episodes of this series, I was like, oh yeah, WrestleMania, you know, hopefully you'll like it. And then seeing that he went to night two of WrestleMania 41, I'm like, I totally understand why he did not become a fan, because that is a terrible, terrible main
No, it's
event.
not. Okay.
That's I just got two words for you that will mean nothing in context of WrestleMania, but it may mean something to you otherwise. Travis Scott.
Okay. I know who that is,
So
but I have no
okay,
context of what it means in WrestleMania. What's
yeah,
funny
he.
was the idea. Oh, I was just going to say the idea of
Oh,
like what they did in that book, going to sporting events. Not that they didn't like, but I mean something that you could talk about. I guess in the course of this episode is
yeah,
when you first moved to Los Angeles. God, you're coming up on it's over 20 years now, isn't it? Or close to 20 years.
almost 20 years. Next
Almost
year will be
20 years.
20. Yeah.
Yeah. And like I went to some wrestling matches with you. I mean, I watched wrestling as a kid. I grew up in Hawaii, and so like there was Polynesian Pacific Wrestling, which I went to one of those, and I saw an AWA wrestling match as well, an evening of AWA wrestling.
Yeah.
But I had gone to those with you because I'm like, wow, it's a live sporting event. It should be fun to check out. And then, as you can kind of allude to, people that know us well enough know that we have been to all of the NHL arenas, symbolized by the pucks over your shoulder there.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a sport that I don't think you were as well versed on that when we started. So it
No.
wasn't like I introduced you to hockey and you introduced me to wrestling, but it was more like each one went to the event to go view that sport with the other one, knowing that they weren't nearly as interested in it, but
Yeah.
yet having a fascination. I'm not watching wrestling in my spare time, but I enjoy a live wrestling event until you took me to WrestleMania here in Los Angeles, and I didn't realize that after 35 years of not watching WWE or WWF, it's exactly the same as it was when I was a kid, and they're still doing the same gimmicks, and so I was a little
Uh,
surprised by that, but maybe I shouldn't have
uh,
been.
See, now you got to come with me to an AEW show. I mean, I don't think you. Uh, I didn't expect a booby trapped backpack from this past Sunday's AEW pay per view. Although those you have to sneak in a nap beforehand because they do go way too long.
Sure, sure.
Um, but yeah, you just touch on like four things that we're going to. I want to tangent off
Bring
onto
it.
because I did mention in the intro, you know, that we've seen every. Shouldn't say we've seen every hockey team. We saw every hockey team up to 2019.
At the
Um,
time, we'd been to
yes,
every arena. There's a few new ones, and then one of the teams relocated, but it's like, we're
yeah,
done. I'm done. I'm
yeah.
not going back. Right.
But when you presented that to me, I I was not a hockey fan. You know, I mean, I may have gone to a Kings game pre, prior to that conversation, but I was in, I, when you initially presented it, I was like, no, this does not sound interesting. It doesn't sound fun. But then the travel aspect came in, and
Yeah.
that's why I decided to go for it. And I'm glad that I did. But I'm going to put a pin in that for right now, because first, before we can get to the quest, we have to get back to the beginning. Why hockey? Like you said, you grew up in Hawaii.
Hmm.
Hockey and Hawaii, other than both starting with H, so being close to each other in the dictionary,
Hmm.
probably aren't usually associated together. So,
And there's the very memorable Saturday Night Live sketch when Wayne Gretzky hosted, and they did it was kind of like a spoof on those surfing movies,
Mm.
and with Jan Hooks playing Anne Margaret, and he's like playing hockey for the Waikiki Kings. That's watch if you know, you know. But it's funny. I was going to ask you, we talked about like the idea of where does fandom start, and hockey was probably the last sport that I got into. If you look,
Okay.
I say no disrespect to soccer or the football, I think of the four major sports. And I know that one of the things that you and I had talked about before going on to record was the idea of like where does fandom begin and how do you start. So I was going to ask you. I mean, we'll dovetail into hockey, but I feel like for me, the first sporting event when I became like starting to follow baseball would have been the first one, and I wonder if that's just part of being a boy in America in the 1980s. I mean, maybe it's like that now. It was like at a certain point you're either doing AYSO soccer or you're doing Little League baseball. For I would imagine Pop Warner doing football. You played basketball at the Y. I feel like baseball and soccer were the two. And I think the first thing I remember was the 1982 World Series, and that was the Cardinals beating the Brewers. That was the first sports memory I have. I would have been 6 years old, and I come from a family of Cardinals fans because the majority of my family is from Northwest Arkansas or Southern Illinois, Southwest Missouri. So they were all Cardinals fans. I vividly remember, Willie McGee and Ozzie Smith and Bruce Sutter and all that stuff. 1982 was the first set of baseball cards that I collected. The 1982 Topps. I can vividly remember what that card looks like with the border, and so. I was at that time. My father was in the military, and I was living in just north of Chicago. My dad was an instructor at the Naval Training Center in Great Lakes, and I always say that 1982 the Cardinals won the World Series. 1983 the White Sox won the division, won the AL West. 1984 the Cubs won the National League East. 1985 the Cardinals won the pennant. So we had that run there with like all these local teams. And so my sister and I became fans of the Cubs because young kids in Chicago, it's like,
Right.
I mean, there are White Sox fans as well, but it just seemed like the Cubs, they were on WGN, Harry Carey, it was just so much more synonymous with that city. And that 84 team was just such everybody fell in love with that team. And Ryan Sandberg was like my sister's favorite player, and we watched them. Unfortunately they lost in the playoffs, but that's kind of where the fandom began. And then I started playing t-ball my first year at Little League, 1983. Mm-hmm. So then it all just kind of encapsulated in that period. Now, before I go into hockey, I'm going to ask you: is your first memory about the same thing? Was there a memorable World Series or Super Bowl or something?
No, it's the same. It's the '82 World Series. It's probably
Yeah.
my first conscious memory of baseball, and I think part of that is because my dad worked for a beer distributor, and for some reason, I don't know where he got them, or if it was something the company was distributing, or um, or if they were distributed elsewhere in the area, and he just got one. But we had a 6-pack of Coca-Cola that had the World Series logo on it and commemorated the World Series victory. So we had
Yeah.
that all growing up. And then for the '84 Cubs, he had a plaque of the pennant, and I think he got that from work as well. And again, I grew up close to about 100 miles north of St. Louis on the Illinois
Okay.
side, so closer to St. Louis than Chicago. So I've always had that Cardinal um, fandom, I guess. But again, I think it's because the '82 World Series, the '85 World Series. '85 is when I started collecting baseball cards, and
Okay.
that was the year you had Vince Coleman setting the rookie stolen base record, Dwight Gooden, the rookie pitching, wins. Pete Rose hit more than Ty Cobb,
Yeah.
in that season. So I think that season of baseball really started to solidify my baseball fandom.
That's what it
Uh,
takes, right? Isn't it
yeah,
funny that you and I wouldn't have met for almost 2 decades, and yet our first memories of sports are pretty much the exact same
same.
moment,
Yeah,
Because as being sports fans in Illinois, you joked about it before, but for the last how many years, when you tell people that we're from Illinois, they just go, "Oh, Cubs." And you're like, "No, Cardinals." Like
no,
we're Southern Illinois. Illinois is a
yeah,
big state, but that little 4 year stretch there where it was like Cardinals, White Sox, Cubs, Cardinals. And the sad part is the White Sox one didn't really resonate. I mean, they didn't make it to the World Series. Neither did the Cubs. But
yeah,
that White Sox '83 team, it was just like, okay, that's nice. They wouldn't go back to the playoffs for another decade, but
Yeah.
that one didn't sit with as many people as the other ones. But yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because other than baseball, and I did play little league, but
Did you? I was going to ask. Yeah.
I mean, let me rephrase that. I was on a little league team, and if the game went so many innings, then I got to go stand in right field for half an inning because everybody
Okay.
got to play.
Okay.
Yeah, my athleticism got lost somewhere in delivery. Um,
My father was
that
the manager of my first little league team, and
okay?
we were actually pretty good. And the funny part is, my mother, God bless her, before I moved out and went to college and then moved to Los Angeles, she found my little league jersey and had it turned into a pillow. Like she found someone. This is like pre Etsy and stuff. She found someone local that could take my jersey and turn. So I still have them. I still have that one, and I have two of my. I played little league baseball for 7 years. And so I have two of the jerseys turned into pillows. It's kind of cool, nice memory. But
Nice. Yeah. Other than that, um, then wrestling became my thing because we were Channel 11 KPLR out of St. Louis would show wrestling at the Chase. My family got a satellite dish in the summer of '84, and so that's when I discovered World Class out of Texas, Midwest or not Midwest, Mid South wrestling. Bill Watts, and it's funny because my friend Kevin Huntsberger, who does the My 123 Cents podcast that I'm on usually every week. You can find that, and he'll be a guest on this series on the next episode. We've talked. We met working at a TV station. He's from the St. Louis area. We were at the same WWF shows in the mid '90s
really,
and didn't know each other. So,
okay.
yeah, it's just weird. The small world, as Stephen Wright says, it's a small world, but I still wouldn't want to paint it. So.
I'm sure I don't remember the first WrestleMania. Barely remember the second one, but I definitely remember the third one. So
Yes.
that's kind of where that was my sweet spot for it. A lot of us. We were probably
Yeah.
about 8, 9 years old, and that's when
Yeah.
we got into it. All at the
But
same, yeah.
yeah. Okay. So we
Do you
established
remember?
baseball. Oh,
Well,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, do you remember? Okay, so baseball has been established as a fan. We can talk about it as throughout the course of this episode. You become a fan because you play it. You become a fan because you watch it. Why do you become a fan? I assume you probably vividly remember the 1985 Chicago Bears, right?
I do, and I do because the 1985 Chicago Bears is the reason why I'm a Miami Dolphins fan.
The one game they lost, right? That year
The
was the
one game that
Dolphins.
I bet on the Monday night game. Everybody was taking the Bears. For some reason, I took the Dolphins. I was in sixth grade. I knew nothing about football.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until probably in the last decade that it dawned on me that they lost. That's the only game the Bears lost.
Yeah.
And, the 72 Dolphins, perfect season and winning the Super Bowl. Um,
Before you were
but
born, by the way. Yeah.
before I was born, yeah. So, and they've done nothing since I became a fan almost 40 years ago. Um,
But
but
that's a weird
but I
segue.
remember that Super Bowl. I would say that Super Bowl, the Bears and Patriots, is probably the first Super Bowl that I watched. At
Yeah.
least knowingly sat down to watch because of who was playing.
I remember the one before it, which would have been the Niners and Dolphins.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just vaguely remember it, but I feel like almost like the Cubs in '84. By '85, even though that it was the Cardinals who were doing well in that division and ultimately won the pennant, the Bears were the ones that had swept Chicago up, and so that was the year that I moved to Hawaii. So we were still following. I mean, again, I didn't watch a lot of football, but there was something about that Bears team. And I mean, the gall to make a song called the Super Bowl Shuffle in the middle of the season, that was just, there
Have
was
you
something,
watched the documentary about that?
I have not, but I mean,
There's a documentary on HBO Max that I would recommend. I mean, it's interesting because they said that the loss to Miami was kind of the inspiration to be like, no, we're going to the Super Bowl. We're going to win. It was
yeah.
that fire they needed to, not become complacent. But
I
uh,
had the 45, I had the 12-inch single of that. And so I feel like that sort of began. Now I may not have been following football as much, the immediate years after. I would have gotten into it a little bit later. But yeah, I feel like that '85 Bears. And now we went. By the time I got to Hawaii was around the time that Michael Jordan showed up in Chicago. So he hadn't really landed on my radar. I did not start following basketball at least until it was like those Showtime Lakers being in Hawaii.
yeah,
They were like the local team. I mean, the Laker games were on some of our local channels in Hawaii, but the national games, you would just see them during the playoffs, it feels like. So it was like one to the next, all around the same time, because I feel like when you're getting to that certain age, you start picking it up. They always say, I mean, you and I have joked about the fact that we always say everything was the best when you were like 12 years old. And usually music, movies, the stuff you listened to and watched when you were 12 years old, you're probably still listening to. And then the sports, when the sports you were following at 12 were the ones that you really, really kind of resonated with. And I've made that, I've talked to my wife's family. My wife's family are all big Laker fans. And I've asked her brother and sister, like, okay, when you were 12 years old, what was happening? And, you know, her brother was like, oh, that's the year that Kobe got here. You know, and then her sister was like, oh, that's the year we won the first title with Shaq and Kobe. And so it's like, everyone remembers that. And so I feel like when I was 12 years old, that was around the time the Cubs made it to the playoffs again. My favorite baseball player at the time was Will Clark and the San Francisco Giants. And they had made it. They played against the Cubs in the World Series, or in the National League Championship Series. And so that's when the Lakers kind of came into view. Yeah. Lakers and Celtics, and then of course the bad boy Pistons, and then Jordan kind of got elevated. He became Michael Jordan by the time when I was about 12 or 13. So then hockey was still, to circle back in a long way to get to your original question, because when I had a hockey blog and I wrote a blog about how I became a fan, and I always mentioned that it was 1988, the year I turned 12 years old, that there was like 3 events that happened that year, and one of them was Nintendo put out their ice hockey game. It was just called ice hockey, and if you remember that one, you had 3 different players you could play with. It was a skinny guy, a fat guy, and then a guy that was like in the middle. And the fat guy had a big hard shot, but he skated really slow, and the skinny guy was really fast, but he didn't have a hard shot. You had that, and you had Blades of Steel not long after that. And so, you know, and then 1988 was also the year that Wayne Gretzky got traded to the Kings. And I used to watch a lot of ESPN Sports Center and just to get baseball highlights, and then eventually basketball. And I remember all of a sudden that was like the news. And we're like, oh, I've heard that name, Gretzky. What happened? Oh, he got traded. Oh, they traded the best player in the league. And it really, really made the news. And so it kind of came into my view a little bit, but it wasn't until a couple of years later that, like, I had a Nintendo and then I got a Sega Genesis. And again, we're talking about being in Hawaii. There's no local teams, right? We had a minor league baseball team that I think moved right around the time that I got there. So all we had was national games. And trying to watch the football games, you know, the football game started at 6 a.m. So by the time I woke up, they were already into the second game, which was almost always the 49ers. We had so many, between Joe Montana and Steve Young, we were always getting 49ers games out there. But I think when I transitioned from the Nintendo to the Sega Genesis, and then I got like John Madden football, and I was playing that a lot. And then they said, oh, we're making a hockey game for the Sega. It was Electronic Arts. They made a game called NHL Hockey. And that was the one where they had the licensing of the NHL, but not the Players Association. So it had all of the teams, all of the logos, and all of the players had numbers underneath them, but there were no names. But you knew when you played with the Kings number 99, you knew who it was. They just didn't have the licensing of the players. And then the next year, the second game that they put out was the opposite. They didn't get the licensing of the logos in the league, but they got the Players Association. So all of a sudden now you've got the names of the players, but then the team is just Los Angeles. It's just, you know, St. Louis. There's no St. Louis Blues kind of example. So I feel like my fandom came from that video game. Just playing, and I learned all the rules from it, and then I started, and then around that, and then I think when I was in high school, as I finished up high school, that's when ESPN got the rights to broadcast hockey in 1992, and we had moved from Hawaii to Kentucky. My father was in the military, so we moved around a lot, and so that's what it was. It was like I was playing that video game constantly, and now games are on ESPN because I still had no local team. Again, I was living in Kentucky. But I used to always jokingly say, the last thing I'll mention was, you know, of those 4 major sports, I became a fan of hockey because it was the one that I couldn't play. Like, I grew up playing Little League Baseball, and we'd play football in the park. Hawaii, it was nice all year round. We'd go to the playground and shoot hoops, especially when I had a growth spurt when I was in the 8th grade, and I grew to be like 6'3", so I played basketball more often, whereas hockey was just like, there was an ice rink in Hawaii, but we went there on a field trip once. There was no, there may have been hockey teams that played there, but there was no, I kind of admired them a lot because of the fact that I couldn't play it. I used to joke that, I can do what Shohei Ohtani can do. He can just do it a lot better than I can. I can do
Mhm.
what LeBron James can do. He just does it a lot better than me. I cannot do what Connor McDavid does. I could not physically figure that out. I don't think I could be on skates with a stick and moving around like that. That's why I've always kind of admired hockey in that regard. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, I don't think you should shortchange yourself on your flopping skills.
Ooh.
Ooh. Hey, LeBron's out of LA, so well, who knows? Um,
That's a whole nother debate.
yes. So anyway, with hockey, so let's then I guess move forward and go into the quest because one of the things I think that drives fandom, I'll touch on this a little bit more after this, is live sports, like you said. You
Yeah.
know, um, but what was it specifically that because if you're a fan of baseball and not really a fan of basketball or football, so I guess let's just normally if people say I'm going to travel and see every arena sporting event, it's baseball. So
Usually baseball.
why not baseball? Why hockey? Other
Well,
than just the fandom of being a hockey fan.
Well, like you said, I think baseball makes more sense because of the fact that the stadiums are all so architecturally different,
Mhm.
and even the dimensions of the playing field are all different. Hockey was just it was two things. Number one, it was just my favorite sport at the time, and then like you mentioned, it was more of the travel aspect. To circle back, um, when I finished high school, my dad retired from the military, and we moved to Southern Illinois, and for the first time, I had a local team, and it was the St. Louis Blues. And so, like you said, the idea of seeing it live made made a much bigger difference. And so that first year that we lived there, I went to my first St. Louis Blues game. That was the old St. Louis Arena where your feet are sticking to the floor and there's rats and stuff. But it was, I remember my buddy was like, hey, let's get a stack of cards at the card shop of the Blues players. And then we're going to go in the parking lot when they pull up and just see if we can get a bunch of autographs. And I wound up doing that. And then before the game started, we walked down. They didn't care if you had an upper deck ticket. They let you go down low before the game started. And just to watch the guys walk out on skates, how large they were. And so, I wound up going to two different games at the old St. Louis Arena before they tore it down, including one against Gretzky and the Kings. So I got to see Wayne Gretzky back in 1994, the one time I ever got to see him. And so that kind of, that's what cemented it there was, like you said, you see it live. I feel like fandom becomes from, like I said, usually a local team does good, or you see it live, or you play it like, Little League. I was joke. I don't want to get sidetracked, but I always think it's funny that like you hear about people who, most Little League baseball teams are named after a major league team.
Yeah.
My first team was the Pirates. I was on, and then I played 4 years on the Reds. But it's crazy how there are some fans who become fans of the major league team because, oh, that was the name of my Little League team. I played on the Yankees when I was in Little League, and now I'm a Yankees fan. So it's funny how that works. But no, the hockey trip, the quest was kind of twofold. Like I said, it was more I was a fan of that sport, and I always tell this story, which my wife doesn't like, but there was I had a friend, I had a female friend who I had a big crush on, and I wanted to date her, but she would not date me. And she was a big hockey fan. We'd go to Kings games together, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's a hockey fan too. This is wonderful. And she wouldn't date me, and I was at her house one time, and she said, she was trying to talk me out of being interested in her. And she said, well, you don't want to be with me. You don't want, what are you going to do? You want to retire and get an RV and go to all the hockey arenas? And she, like this passing flippant comment, and it was kind of like, well, yeah, that sounds awesome. And then the other half of it was my mother passed away when I was still in my 30s, and when she got sick, I was spending most of my vacation time going home to visit her. And after she had passed away, within a couple of years, I was working. I was moving up in the film industry, and I was making a little bit more money. I've got no children. I'm single. And my father was like, I think you should, don't worry about me. Go travel. Come and see me at the holidays. I'm not going anywhere. Go travel. And so when this idea came up, I said, Dad, I think I'm going to try to go see all 30 hockey arenas. He was like, oh my God, what a tremendous idea. Because he was in the Navy, And so he spent 25 years in the Navy traveling the world and seeing all this stuff. I mean, he retired and he didn't really want to travel anymore because he wanted to stay home. He'd done all that traveling for his job, whereas I hadn't. I mean, I've been to the cities where we lived when we moved around so much, but I hadn't done as much traveling. And I think around the time, Chad, you and I, we started the quest in 2013, which was coming off of, that was the season that there was a lockout in hockey in 2012 that shortened the season to a half season. And I think that's when you kind of started watching it on television a little bit more. And I remember the 2013 playoffs were pretty exciting, if I remember correctly. And so we came up with that idea that it's like, well, now this is the time to go. I have a little bit of disposable income. I have a lot of time off from my work. I have my father's blessing. And something I used to have to try to reiterate to people was, it was never a situation where I would just fly in, see the game, and fly out. Which is why I was hoping it would appeal to you, because I didn't want to do it by myself. I mean, I could have, but I really didn't want to.
Yeah.
I wanted to sell you on the travel aspect of it, and that's what it was for me. I love being able to, we're almost 15 years removed from doing it. And when people talk about, oh, I went on a trip to Tampa. And I'm like, oh yeah, I've been there. And they'll be like, or they'll say, oh, I'm going to Denver. And I'll be like, oh, you got to check this place out. We went there when I went and saw the hockey arenas. Now they kind of gradually progressed. I think you had asked me before, like, how do you decide which ones to go in which order? And the first thing I looked at was, is there a Hall of Fame player that's on the end of his career that's retiring you want to see before they retire? And so when we would do these hockey trips, I would try to see if I could find another sporting event to go to in that town. And the first one we did was Denver, because Peyton Manning was getting up there. And I said, let's go see a Colorado Avalanche game, and let's go see the Broncos so we can see Peyton Manning. I think he played one more season after we saw him. And so that was the first one we did. And that was also one where we flew in Saturday morning and flew out. We were planning to fly out Sunday night after the game, but it was a day game that NBC flexed into a night game. So we had to stay one more night, fly out Monday morning. But what sightseeing did we do? We went to Casa Bonita from South Park. We went to a very famous arcade. I forget if it was called the One Up or something like that.
It's called the One Up, yeah.
Yeah, and they were having a Donkey Kong competition there, and I met the dude from King of Kong, Billy Mitchell.
Yeah.
And then I think the Sunday morning before the football game, we went to Red Rocks.
Yes.
And so we walked up and down the Red Rocks Amphitheater. So at least we did a little bit of sightseeing. But I kind of need to go back. I'd like to, I wanted to go to the Mint, and it was closed on the weekends. And the state capitol closed on the weekends. So, we didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have a lot of time off, and that's just how we did it. And then from then on, we started looking at like longer trips. You can't go to New York and not, the good thing about going to New York, you can knock out 3 teams. But I'm like, I'm not just going to go see 3 and then leave. It's New York. Let's see the Statue of Liberty and stuff like that. And, and so I feel like that was, at a certain point, a lot of those legendary players. The only other one, I think we did the New York trip fairly early because Jaromir Jagr was playing for the Devils, and he was, I think, around 40. And so I'm like, okay, we better go see him before he's done. And he played like 5 more years. But it's like, how did I supposed to know that? And so it was nice to have gotten to see that. But after that point, I knew the list. It kept dwindling down. When we started the list, I'd already been to 6. So it was like, okay, how do I do 24 arenas? And we tried to do them about maybe 3 or 4 a year, right? And so if you ask, like, how did I decide which ones to do? I built a spreadsheet every year because I'm a dork and I like to plan. And I looked, okay, here's all the teams we have left to go to. And what I would look at was, how can I fold in holidays into my trips to save on my vacation, my limited vacation time? So it would always be, who's playing on Thanksgiving? Who's playing on Martin Luther King Junior Day, who's playing on President's Day, and then when I used to work at 20th Century Fox, we got Good Friday off. So I would just look at those 4 holidays and say, who's playing on these days? And then it became, do I want to see a baseball game at the same time as the hockey game? And if so, then I got to make that trip in April. I got to make that the Good Friday trip. And then so like we did it with Toronto, where we went to the Blue Jays home opener, and then did the Maple Leafs on the same trip. I know we went to Phoenix, even though I'd already been there, but we went to Arizona and did the Coyotes and the Diamondbacks, at the beginning of the season. So that's kind of how it formed. It was just basically, are you playing around these holidays? And then you whittle the list down from there, and now it's like, okay, you got 6. And then you go, okay, well, what else is happening at the same time? And that was, I kind of gave myself some options, and we did a pretty good job. By the time we got to the end, it was like we only had 3 or 4 left, and it worked out perfectly. Where I'm like, okay, we'll do that one President's Day, we'll do that one Good Friday, and then and then before you know it, it was like we'd done all 31 at the time.
31, yeah. And the last 2 that we did were Washington and Boston in 2019. And for me, I think when we did those, it was very I don't want to say unsatisfactory, but I think because I'd been to Boston and I'd been to DC, so they weren't new experiences for me. So I was like, okay, I mean, the quest is done, but it doesn't feel complete. Like something's missing. And then I think I told you, I'm like, we have to see the cup raised.
Yeah.
But the problem with everything except for the Super Bowl is you don't know what game is going to be the championship game.
Yeah.
Now, in 2019, I think it was almost like the Hollywood ending. Living here in LA, if we pitched this to Ron Shelton to write the hockey movie of fans traveling to see it, that's a little Touchstone reference and Bull Durham reference for you cinephiles. You started off saying St. Louis was your hometown team. Who's in the Stanley Cup Finals in 2019? St. Louis. Who's never won a championship in the NHL in 2019? St. Louis.
Yeah.
But because I came to you and I said, we have to see the cup raised. St. Louis is playing. And we almost went to game 6.
Yeah. Because we kind of had to plan. I mean, we even planned it. If you remember correctly, I was planning it the round before because it was our final 4 teams were. It was like St. Louis was playing San Jose, and then I believe Boston was playing Carolina.
I know.
So we were trying to figure out, okay, which 2 teams. I was looking at flights. What days are the flights? They already knew what day the games were going to be for the final. They published that ahead of time. Mm-hmm. So when it got to be Boston and St. Louis, it was like, okay, now narrow it down because the problem was. The cost is going to go up, if you're buying flights at the last minute.
Yep.
And I feel like when we were looking at the Boston, we were like, okay, well, obviously you're not going to go to the first 3 games. And then it's like, as soon as, thankfully it worked out really well with that series. If you remember, Boston and St. Louis split the first 2 games. So we were like, okay, well, now we know there's not going to be, there'll have to be a game 5. Mm-hmm. So then we're like, okay, now we're only looking at a possible game 5, game 6, or game 7. And then they split games 3 and 4. So we're like, okay, game 5 is off. So now the cup's only going to be in game 6 or game 7. And St. Louis won game 5 in Boston. So it was like, are we going to do this? Are we going to fly to St. Louis to see this? And the tickets, I feel like the cheapest tickets that I saw to get in the door, which are probably nothing now, I want to say it was about $2,000. And so we kind of had to weigh over this idea, and I think it was like a Sunday night.
It was like a Sunday game. Yeah, that's why we could fly to St. Louis and come back on Monday and not have to take time off from work.
We were gonna, and so it was like just got to drop $2,000 on a ticket. That's all. And we thought about it, and I remember saying, and I guess you must have agreed with me that it would have really, really been painful to spend that money on the ticket and the flight and not have them win. And so we just said, you know what, we're going to take our chances, and we didn't do it, and Boston won and forced a game 7. And then at that point, now it's like, I think game 7 would have been on the Wednesday. So we got a Monday and a Tuesday to sort of square things away with the boss. And in my situation, the boss was my wife, and kind of figure out like, okay, are we going to do this? And the flight I was surprised. I'm pretty sure wasn't it Alaska? We flew Alaska from LAX to Boston. And even though we bought the ticket the day before the flight, the ticket wasn't terribly expensive. But I did the research, because I'm a dork again, that I believe it was 2013 when the Blackhawks won the Stanley Cup. They won the Cup in Boston. So I watched YouTube clips of it to see which end of the ice does the Stanley Cup and the commissioner come out of. And so I figured out that, and then I found that section on the Ticketmaster, basically, and I made sure we bought tickets. And I also said, I'm not going to pay, it was like $2,000 to be in the nosebleeds,
Yeah.
or close to $3,000 to be closer. And you're like, if you're again, I know it's easy to say because we had the money. Well, at least we had it then. We might have been into debt, but it's like if you're going to drop that kind of money and fly across the country, you might as well just spend the extra and get a little bit closer. I'm not going to be in the nosebleeds
Yeah.
and yeah. So yes, we spent a little bit less than $3,000, and we were down in the section where the end where the cup came out, and so that was like it was like, well, no matter what, it was either I'm either going to see, no matter what, I'm seeing the cup. But the added bonus of being able to say that I saw the team that I kind of grew up cheering for, even though my Blues fandom had lapsed a little bit, years of living in Los Angeles and lots of playoff heartbreak for the Blues. Kind of, it was like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And but yeah, so it was kind of cool. I can't lie, I did get a little emotional toward the end because I started thinking about my mother and thinking about all the different. She bought me Blues jerseys for Christmas and stuff back in the day, and all the different Blues merchandise that I had. And so what was funny was there were so many Bruins fans there that when the Blues did win the Cup, I mean, it's Game 7 of the Cup final. You're here, but no, they left. Like a lot of them left because they were probably so upset that their team had lost, which allowed us to kind of kept moving a little bit closer and closer and closer for the celebration.
Yeah.
And so it was like at that point, we finished the quest. We've seen the Cup. Not only that, we've seen the team from our local area finally win their first Cup after 50 years. So that was sort of the perfect place to end it. And then that's when they said, "Hey, let's add more teams." I mean, I think Vegas had already been in. Chad and I went to the very first Vegas Golden Knights home game so that we could cross that one off the list. But then after they won the Cup, then it was like, "Oh, we're putting a team in Seattle," and I'm like, I'm done. I mean, I have since been, but I was like, I'm done with the quest and I'm done blogging about it. And the Cup was the kind of the culmination of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Vegas had actually made the playoffs the year before, and I had tickets to Game 7.
That's right.
In Vegas because I bought them when they went on sale, thinking if either they go to Game 7 and we see the Cup then, or they don't go to Game 7 and I get my money back. But so now taking that quest, because again, I was not a hockey fan when we started. The first game in Colorado was like, yeah, okay, it's interesting. Game 2 was San Jose, and that to me was a religious experience. And that's you have a giant shark head come down from the ceiling. You've got SJ Sharkey roaming around. And I realized none of that has anything to do with what's actually on the ice. But it was just the atmosphere, the experience. And so that's when I really bought into seeing all 30 teams. And be like, okay, let's see what's going to happen. And just the experience of, again, traveling, seeing other things in the city.
Yeah.
How important do you think seeing the sport in person is to solidifying a fandom? How if you just take someone who isn't a fan and say, "Hey, let's go," is it more? Are they more? Do you think they're more likely to become a fan afterwards, or
I think so. Yeah. I mean, because I feel like there's something about when you see stuff on television, they people, like whether it be a movie or a TV show, and in this case sports, people seem larger than life. And I've often heard that people always ask like movie stars, if you had a choice, would you want to be a movie star or like a rock star? And a lot of times they always say rock star because they get that immediate interaction with the fans because when they go on tour and stuff like that. And so like if there's a TV show that you like, you're probably not going to see the star of that TV show come to your town. Odds are. Whereas if there's a baseball player that you like, he's going to be in your town at some point. And then you have the ability based on your budget, I guess, can you sit in the nosebleeds or can you get as close as possible and sort of relive that experience. I think part of it too, the extra fandom is like you don't have commercial breaks. And so I feel like once you're in the stadium and you see what happens in between innings that you wouldn't have seen on television, it just sort of adds to that experience, right? And I feel like hockey is probably the best because I learned this when I went to my first hockey game, is there's so much more that you see at a game that you don't see on television, namely when the guys change. Because most of the time in hockey, when a team does a line change, they dump the puck into one end and they change. The camera follows the puck. The line change happens off the frame. You're not going to see that. Whereas I remember the very first game I went to, we're up in the upper deck or whatever, and the puck goes in, and all of a sudden, 3 or 4 guys skate to the bench, and then 4 more guys jump on. It's the only sport that substitutes its players without stopping the game, right? And so that's where the fandom solidifies. because you're like, that's so cool. And then the just that also, like, especially in hockey, when you hear a goal get scored, there's going to be a horn that goes off that's going to vibrate your seats, and everyone around you is going to jump to their feet, which you're probably not going to get that watching on TV. TV's where you can at least establish your love of the team and your interest in certain players. But then, like you said, if it's once you see it in person, it's solidified. Now, I don't know if that's will that work in something like football, where I feel like you're so far from the game, and people will tell you many times football is a sport that a lot of times is better enjoyed at home. But at least it's more just like, hey, I got to have this shared experience with 70,000 people next to me who are also fans. So in a way, that one could make you a bigger fan. But I feel like definitely with hockey, and then and then with basketball, that's also an indoor arena, so it gets a lot louder, and it really wraps you up in the experience of that. As long as, especially, we go into all these arenas, we learned which teams had a good in-game presentation, right? And that kind of helps. We've been to some dull games too. I'm not gonna lie, and we've been to some that have really. I liked going to Columbus and seeing that cannon go off whenever they scored a goal. You'd hear it on television, but it's just not the same as when you're there in person, So that was, for sure. I would say that being there, it's going to put it over the top. And I'll dovetail this real quick into we talk about how you become fans, and I still say it's either your local team goes on a magical playoff run, or you've played the game. Like I said, like Little League. I mentioned that my wife's family, they're all Laker fans. My mother-in-law mentions being a Laker fan. I don't know where it began. I think my father-in-law was a big Laker fan, so it probably rubbed off onto her. But her kids, my wife's brother and sister, are all big Laker fans. But last year, when the Dodgers won the World Series for the second time, my mother-in-law started watching the World Series games, and she was watching them with my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, and she would report back to me, "Oh my God, that game last night was so incredible." And when it was all over, she was so excited that, and she's like, "I'm a Dodger fan now." Like that, they had won the year before, but I don't know what it was about this particular run that, in fact, it was a pretty exciting series, one of the great series they've said of all time. I was actually at Disneyland on Game 7, so and it was, the game was on Fox. You can't stream really Fox without a cable platform, right? So I was just watching the MLB app and watching the updates and listening to people walking around that were experiencing it, and you could hear cheers come up as people were going from one ride to the next. And so she became like a Dodgers fan. She's got a jersey now, and she said, "I want you to take me to a game now this season," which we just did a couple weeks ago. It was actually my mother-in-law's born and raised in the Philippines, and so they had Filipino Heritage Night at Dodger Stadium, and so that was the game that I specifically took her to, and she was so excited to see it. And I said, "You want to walk around?" And she's like, "No, I want to sit." We did a little bit of walking around, but she wanted to kind of stay and watch the game. And we saw the Dodgers won. They had a couple home runs. She got to see Shohei Ohtani in person. But the only sad part is when World Series was over and then we came into this season, she was like, "Oh man, I can't wait to watch more Dodgers games." And I said, "Oh," and she said, "Oh, you mean they're not on Fox?" And I was like, "No, the World Series is on Fox." And she goes, "You mean all their games aren't on Fox?" And I had to explain to her the whole point with the Dodgers cable network, and how you have to have a cable package, which she does not have a cable package, or you have to pay $30 a month to stream the games. And she's like, "I'm not doing that." Right. So she actually gave me a Dodgers schedule at the beginning of the year and said, "Here's a pen. I need you to circle all of the games that are actually on network television that I can watch." So I had to go through their schedule and figure out, when are they on the Saturday Fox game of the week? When are they on the NBC Sunday night game? And actually they've had about 4 or 5 of them, and I'll still text her the day of, "Hey, don't forget, Dodgers at 4:00 on Fox." And she's usually, "Okay, I'm all tuckered in. I'm ready to sit down and watch the games." But that was kind of sad. That's about being detached from fandom, is the idea that she fell in love with this team, got to go to a game, and now cable sports rights are keeping her from becoming an even bigger fan, probably.
Yeah, and so we're getting down to the final minutes of this, and there's 2 points here I want to touch on real quick, because the first one I was going to do is Sports Live, the World Cup. As we record this, the World Cup is going on. It's across North America, so games are at the LA Stadium. You and I, again, this is one of those things where we said, it's in our town, we don't have to travel, It only happens once every 4 years. Let's do it. And so, thankfully, luckily, you found tickets below face value with good seats again.
Yeah, we lucked
And
out.
we went to the Switzerland versus Bosnia and Herzegovina game, and it was a fun experience. But for me, it's funny because after I watched the game, after being there, I was like, okay, yeah, it's fun, it's great, I can move on. I don't know if it's because there just isn't anything else on TV during the day and I'm home, but I've been having the games on, which the streaming rights. I do not have a cable package, but I do have Peacock, which has Telemundo, which has the Spanish announcing rights, broadcasting rights for the games. So I watch all the games in Spanish. I do not speak Spanish, so I do not understand what is going on in the games.
Eh, you can
Yeah,
see
I
they're
mean, you can
kicking the ball
see,
around. It's
yeah,
fine.
but so I'll touch on that in a minute. But to get your review or your viewpoint first, after going to a World Cup game, are you more a soccer fan, or are you at the same point where it's like, yeah, it was fun, but it just didn't grab me?
I always joke about the fact that like there's something about sports at like the highest level. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's one thing to watch a regular season sporting event. It's another thing to watch a playoffs game. It's another thing to watch like a game from the final, from the championship series or something. There's an added interest in it, and the World Cup is essentially it's the best. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that they have the Champions League in Europe between all the different they have the ones between the clubs, they have the ones between the countries. You know, we have our MLS soccer here in
Mm-hmm.
America, but there's something about the World Cup, especially it's every 4 years, that the joke I used to make was that I will watch it when it comes when it rolls around every 4 years. I don't watch the in between. I really don't watch a whole lot of soccer in between those 4 years. Um, but my joke was that I get wrapped up in the fervor of it. You know, there's something kind of exciting about the pageantry. The fact that it's nations playing its nations.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that and here in America we have these issues, especially with the NBA, where the idea of like load managing and people just taking games off, they don't want to play every day, and they just want, and then they don't really turn it on until the playoffs. Whereas this is the World Cup, like these guys are going to play no matter what. Like this is the pinnacle of their sport.
Yeah.
But my joke was that all it takes is one game on television, maybe even a half a game, to remind me of why I don't watch the sport. Because there's enough issues with it that I mean, again, soccer fans will tell you, oh, that's just part of the game, and this is why we love this game. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, but I watch hockey and baseball and football, and I have a hard time with the diving. I have a
Mm-hmm.
hard time with some of the rules, with it being like stoppage time, like because I was talking to someone at work because World Cup fever has filled up our office. We have a fantasy pool going. The games, we have TVs throughout our office. The games are constantly on. Yesterday there was a game on that went to the penalty kicks, and so at a certain point when the penalty kick started, about 25 of us were all huddled around a television set, and none of our bosses said anything. It was just like they were just like, let's just watch this play out. And I was talking to somebody about the stoppage time thing. And I said, if you would just stop the clock when the ball goes out of bounds, just stop the clock, like every other sport that we watch in
Mm-hmm.
America, when the ball goes out of bounds, I should say a clocked sport, if the puck goes into the crowd, they don't just keep the clock running in a hockey game and then the ref has to go, okay, yeah, there's about 3 more minutes
Yeah.
left in the game. No, you stop the game. And my thought was, if you stop the clock every time the ball goes out of bounds, you probably would see less flopping, because part of it is that they want to stay on the ground and try to drag the game out. I mean, yes, part of it is they want to draw the attention and get a foul, which you see in other sports. You see it in pretty much almost every sport. Maybe baseball's kind of hard to draw a foul,
Yeah.
but in hockey, basketball, and football, you're going to play to the refs. But I feel like sometimes they stay on the ground a little bit longer because they want to try to drag out the game, and especially if it's a team that's winning, and they're one of their guys will fall on the ground, and the other team is like they're trying to make a comeback. The clock's ticking, but none of us know. It's very bizarre that to have a sporting event with a clock and the participants on the field have no idea how much
How
time
much
is
time?
that's what I'm saying. Like I can watch it. I can treat it like the Olympics. It comes around every 4 years. I don't have to understand the nuances of it, but I can appreciate the athletic competition at the highest level. But as far as maintaining fandom, it's hard because I still think the offsides rule in soccer is one of the worst rules in all of sports. It's just it's so bizarre. It's just the idea that a defender can move around and force a player offside. Like in hockey, the line is painted on the ice. You know the puck has to be the first thing over that line or else it's offsides. Whereas in soccer, well, you just can't get behind somebody. And so you see what they call the offsides trap, where if a striker is going toward the goal, then the defenders will go the opposite direction. They will actually go away from their goalie to enforce the guy offsides, and then they'll put their hand up like as if, oh, he's offsides, and then they'll stop playing. And it's just, I don't like that rule. And so between that and the flopping and the stoppage time and stuff like that, I love the fact that there's no commercials other than this new hydration break that we have in the World Cup. That's pretty exciting. So it's more of a, you have it on, and then the good thing is if a goal is scored, you're going to get 17 replays. And that's why the games are on at 10 o'clock in the morning during the day while I'm working. So we have them on at the TVs. And if I look up and see a goal gets, I check it enough to where I can see the score change. And when it does, then it's like, oh, what happened? I know I'm going to get a replay. Right. But like, I heard something recently where someone said, is this, having the World Cup here in North America, is this going to renew interest in MLS? Is it going to make new soccer fans in America? And I was like, I hate to say it. I don't want to be too cynical. That's your thing. But the only way that soccer would be more popular in this country is if somehow the NFL and the NBA just dissolved. Thanks. Like we have too many other sports that are drawing people's interests that have certain rules that are a little bit more exciting for those fans that they can relate to versus, and I hate to say it, maybe the scoring, there's not enough scoring, stuff like that, where it's like, there might be a little bit of a bump. I'm sure there's probably somebody local who might want to be like, oh, I'll go to a game. We have two teams here in LA. We have LAFC and the LA Galaxy. The problem is the majority of the players that you're watching in the World Cup are not playing in this league. And we don't have the best players, the best hockey players, and the best basketball players, and the best football players, and the best baseball players all play in this country. The best soccer players do not. Except what Messi does right now, but he's also 40. So it's like, we're not getting these guys in their prime. So will this create new soccer fans? I'll ask you, Chad. It's the games have been exciting, but it's also because of the stakes. I can't see you or anybody be saying like, this is going to make me a bigger fan of the MLS. It might make you want to watch the UEFA Champions League because those are sort of like playoff matches between some of the best of the best. But because those individual European soccer leagues are also top heavy because they don't have salary caps, which is kind of what looks like baseball, where the richest teams just win all the time and they don't have a playoff. So in order to have a playoff, they have to have the richest teams from each league just play each other. And just get all those poor teams out of the way and say the richest teams in England play the richest teams in France, play the richest teams in Germany in a separate tournament. And that gets a lot of, I think World Cup fans should watch that versus trying to watch the MLS.
Yeah. I said when we were at the game, I said that even if I had like the best time at the game, it was not going to make me a soccer fan because of the fact that we were watching the best of the best. To go from that to watching a Galaxy or a LAFC game, and no disrespect to those players, because again, they can do it a lot better than I can.
Sure.
But it would be like going from watching the World Series to watching the single A baseball team, baseball game. It's just the talent, the skill, the atmosphere is not going to be the same. So, I had one more point, but I'm trying to stick to a tight schedule on these series, so
we're going into stoppage time here. just go ahead.
You know what? I'm going to allow that because of the topic that we're going.
Let me check my watch. Let me see how much time we've got left.
I think we've got +4 on this one.
+4. Okay, go.
Because I was going to say, you made a good point. We're talking about going to see sports live, and especially families taking kids and kids growing up watching live. With the price of tickets nowadays, I don't think had we not done the quest when we did it, I definitely don't think we could have done it over 6 years like we did. I think it would have been, spread out more because of the cost of tickets. So point one.
You think so? You really there?
I think. If you're, at least here in LA, if I want to go see a Dodgers game, the cheapest.
Don't use them as an example. Don't use them as the worst example to use.
I know the
Because you can
Angels
see an
games.
Angels game. You can see
I
an
can see
Angels
an
game
Angels
reaching.
game if I will take money from somebody to take their tickets off them. But I think even uh, you know, I mean, and granted they were playing the Dodgers, but this past weekend the Dodgers were playing the Padres in San Diego. Cheapest tickets were $135, and that was face value and for the upper deck. So I think when you're looking at $100, and I could have done some research to look at prices across the country to see what they were. But you made an interesting point with the games not being on broadcast. Again, Dodgers, you have to have the Dodgers network. You can't even just buy the MLB network package. You
Not
have
if
to
you
buy the
live in LA.
Dodgers into
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Um, but with the games being separated across different platforms now, do you think that is also a hindrance to long-term sports fandom and growth?
It's like a double edged sword. To go back real quick, I will say, could we have done the quest now? I really feel I know you've asked me that before, and I feel like we could have. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the main thing was I don't think the tickets have gone up that exponentially worse than when because we were always going.
Yeah.
In the interest of full disclosure, we were never sitting in the best seats. We were always sitting
Right.
in the upper deck. Usually, we would try to get in the corner because that was a view you don't get on television. And so I feel like those seats are probably maybe they've gone up by $20, $30 each. Hotels and flights, I mean, flights have maybe gone up a little bit. The only difference is like I feel like I'm also making a lot more money than I did 13 years ago, and I don't have children. Neither one of us have children, so maybe that would have been that's kind of a hindrance. Yeah, you have to deal with if you try to take a family of four to a game. Is that going to be ridiculous? Yeah, unfortunately, but like you said, is it? And it's kind of the same thing with the cable. The idea of that's revenue for the team. So it's that double-edged sword because on the one hand, you can say, especially this applies in baseball, I don't like the fact that it costs that much to go to a game. I don't like the fact that it's going to cost me to have these different streaming platforms to watch all these games. But that money is going towards that team to go towards that payroll to allow us to get the best players. And so it's like it's kind of tough for if a Dodger fan would complain about, oh my God, I got to pay $30 to get this cable channel, but the money that the Dodgers are getting from their cable channel is what's allowing them to pay some of these exorbitant salaries. So yeah, that's why I'm very curious. That's why baseball is not the best example to use because the sports that actually have salary caps, they've kind of balanced all that out. Whereas I feel like the tickets are always going to be more expensive in New York or LA, I would imagine, than it is. When we were doing our hockey trips, we went to a game. I think the only time we sat in the lower bowl at a hockey game was in Phoenix and in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you on this microphone right now, I got tickets to see Florida, who's since won 2 Stanley Cups. When you and I saw them, I got us 2 tickets in the lower bowl for $30 each. We went on a Monday night,
Yeah.
and the arena was half full. And when we went to Phoenix, I think we paid about 75 or 80, but we were 4 rows from the glass because I was like, this is the only arena, well maybe Florida, where we can drop $80 and sit 4 rows from the glass. Because normally on some of those trips, we were dropping $80. When we were in New York, you're dropping $80 to be in the nosebleeds. The worst ticket was Toronto, and that was one of the last ones we did, and that was I wanted to see Saturday night, hockey night in Canada, and Toronto was playing Winnipeg. They're playing another Canadian team, and those were $200. But I feel like you could probably still go see the Maple Leafs for $200. I haven't looked, I haven't checked. I assume you could still get in for $200. It's not like it's gone up to $500 by now. It's still somewhat manageable. I see the Dodgers are a bad example just because when Ohtani came over, all of a sudden the ticket prices started to go up a little bit more. Versus how many Dodgers games have you and I been to before? The last 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. You would get Dodger tickets for $40. It wasn't that bad. Now I don't know if that's across the board. Anytime a team does well, the next year their ticket prices are going to go up probably.
Yeah.
But then they justify it by saying, hey, you want us to keep this team together. We gotta, right. And that's you get into the whole economics of the game. Yeah. But I feel like the fandom's still going to be there. I think the fandom will be there where people will get opportunities to see it. It might be a little bit more splintered. I hope that there's an opportunity where maybe you have Amazon Prime and you could watch if your favorite football team plays a Thursday night game on there. I mean, it's probably one of the reasons you're going to see more football fans than other sports is because the games are on network television, even if you get stuck with your local team. So I feel like there should be enough opportunities. I hope it's not too cost prohibitive. You pick your spots. You go on a weeknight. You go in a team that's not the most desirable. I went to a Padres game last year, and I think we paid $40, but they were playing. I mean, I can't remember who they were playing, but it wasn't the Dodgers.
Yeah.
That's going to go. Those tickets are going to go up and unfortunately, that's one of the bad things is that sometimes teams raise the face value of tickets based on who the opponent is, which is that's nefarious. I don't like that. But.
All right. Well, we're curious to hear your thoughts.
The whistle's going. I think the ref's calling it. I think the
Yeah.
stoppage time is over.
Yeah. Well, at full time, yes, we want to hear your thoughts. Tell us about your fandoms, what you think, how you became a fan, who you're a fan of. Are sports overpriced? Mike, it's been fun. It's been great. We'll obviously have you back on later to discuss other aspects of pop culture fandom. But for now, as we say, as the show is titled, question everything.